Hey, kid. Welcome to Kinfolk Unscripted.
I'm Chanel, a straight stay-at-home mom of a preschooler.
And I'm Martissa, a queer married, hopefully soon-to-be mama.
And this is a podcast amplifying Black and queer presence in family building, wellness, and intentional living. Unfiltered conversations, honest experiences, and the joy of figuring it all out together.
Nell, what's up with you?
Well, I do have an update on said shave cloth from the first episode. It's not great, but we do have a shade cloth. I'm happy to report. It looks tacky as fuck, and I'm very much not happy about it, but it is serving its purpose. So for now, we're going to keep it, kind of where it is. But there's so many HOA rules and all this stuff that's like messing up where I want it to be, how I want it to look, how tall it can be. So it's just really a mess. And, honestly, I should have paid attention to those rules before I even put the garden beds down. But at that point, I wasn't really thinking about shade. I probably should have been, but I really wasn't. I was just like, this is where I want this bed. This is where the sun is shining. This is where it's going to get some good shade in the parts of the afternoon. This is where I can see it through my house. I wasn't thinking about the HOA. So that's what's up.
The HOA with a stick in their ass. Because it's like some of this stuff is really not that deep. It'll be okay.
I have my sister-in-law, they put their Christmas lights up. This was the year before last. They put their Christmas lights up, and they got a letter from the HOA saying, you cannot put your Christmas lights up early. Mind you, it was like a week or two before Christmas. Or no, sorry, it was the end of November. So it wasn't December yet.
Okay.
And they're like, you can't put them up early. They already had theirs up. There's this HOA building. There's this community building they already had Christmas lights up when they sent out letters to them.
So then why are you sending that to me?
I just don't know if they have much else to be doing. So that is my complaint with them. But
that would piss me off because I'll be like, write me a little letter back.
I know.
And also, then what's the tea on yours? Also, it would piss me off to no end to spend my hard-earned money and all the time that it takes to buy a fucking house just for motherfuckers to still look at me and tell me what I can and cannot do with my own property.
Yep. But that's kind of what you sign up for. Because, and mind you, you are paying them to do this shit.
Right.
Paying them to terrorize. So, and don't get me wrong, I mean, there's some benefits, obviously, but that kind of stuff really gets on my nerves. So, we'll see. But for now, at least things are not being burnt up to a crisp. So, yeah, I'm happy about that. That's helpful. That's very helpful. So, what's up with you?
I feel like the opposite issue of you. So yesterday we had a tornado warning, and I told Chanel about this earlier today. I was out there when the rain and the wind started, and I thought I was in that damn Michael Jackson.
I think it's Human Nature.
Jackson. Is it Human Nature? The video? I'm putting a little clip here.
Yeah, he's like, it's with the way.
That was literally me outside. I never experienced no shit like that before in my life. Both my sister-in-law was here. Both my sister-in-law and Mars was running out to help me. And so my sister-in-law was like, I thought you were going to blow away. I was like, girl, same. It was insane.
You were out there, you were going to do it. You was going to blow away for those plants.
I saw the peppers going vertical. I mean, going horizontal.
Jesus.
I was like, not on my
Where's life. Gravity?
What the fuck is going on? So yeah, that was yesterday. So anyway, this morning I quickly did a 3-hour order of some plant stakes and some ties and some netting, because I needed some stuff for some trellising anyway. Because I was like, they were talking about they were saying we're under a tornado watch right now, but it's quite literally sunny and blue skies. So I don't know what that means. But
being on guard.
Right. Be looking to the left and to the right. Just waiting. But yeah, so I I had them send that stuff really quick because I was like, I cannot. We need some staking. We need some supports.
Yeah, because you
I
don't
got
wanna,
lucky this time. I don't want to. I don't want to get fucked at the second.
and then there's so many elements, with gardening, because you have the literal elements of the earth, the seasons and all that, pests, and then just general like mishaps, accidents happen. I accidentally stepped on this. I have planted this golden amaranth, which I do have one in the garden bed, but I
Ooh.
planted more like on the ground just to kind of help the ground, and just to see it because I think they grow really pretty. And it was growing pretty well, and I accidentally stepped on it because it's like really close to the bed.
Damn.
And it had been weeks, like it was like this tall. So she had really like,
Yeah, she had a little height
and
on
then
her.
I came, I had walked back one day and she was like that little V,
Damn.
that yeah. So many different like factors. So yeah, I do understand ordering that stuff because at least you can try to mitigate one of those risks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I did when I was trying to amend the community garden bed, I snapped Maurice's okra. I had already killed. Yes, I had 2 of them. The other one died in my raised bed, and then the one at the community garden, it was fine. It was doing great. I accidentally snapped it in half.
That's so sad. Oh, this is going on 2 years of trying to grow this. And for the kin, Maurice is a farmer in Atlanta who we met. I forgot what year it was.
For your 30th birthday, so it was
I don't
2
know.
years ago.
But
Whatever.
yeah, like 2 years ago, and the year before that, Manny and I had met him. Manny it was his turn to plan our anniversary. So we went to Atlanta and we went to his house where he like shows people around his garden, teaches them things, we plant stuff, all that. So then we went back for my 30th birthday, and Alan Mars were with us and our daughter. And then so we all went and hung out with Maurice, learned some more about planting, tasted some stuff. He gave us a bunch of clippings. Like he's amazing.
Yeah, he's so cool.
But he gave Al some okra seeds that he had grew, and so she's been trying to grow them. I tried to grow them as well. I didn't actually try this season. I was trying in the wrong season, first of all, when I tried, but yeah, I haven't tried this season. But we're thinking that they really do crave like heat and humidity, like a ton of it, which I mean, y'all are having a lot of humidity right now, so it could have, it did sound like it was doing pretty good with that. But
my other okra is doing great. Like it's doing great. It still hasn't gotten like as tall. Like I'm like, okay, come on, because I know it can get really tall, but it's got beautiful leaves. It looks healthy. Now the aphids, and the one in the community garden has ants all over it, and I kind of feel like the ants are farming the aphids.
Yeah, I've noticed that like because my sunflowers are actually the problems in the garden. They're the ones who have aphids or whatever it is all over them. These gray little, and there's ants all over all of them. And it's just like every time I go out there, they've multiplied by 3 trillion. And I'm like, okay, well, good. It's on the sunflowers and nothing else. But now it's getting to the point where I think I might have to cut them down. Like it's out of hand. And now when I like the smaller sunflowers that grow, they're getting on them before they even really get a chance to like. But the okra is much bigger now, not super tall, but like bushier.
Okay.
It doesn't have aphids that I know of, but it did have, it could have been aphids, it could have been something else. I don't know. Those in the squash were being attacked by the same whatever. The way I got that water hose and blasted them, I was out there 3 times a day because they like new growth too. So you'll see them just all over.
Yes.
And eventually they just kind of stopped. So now I go out there every now and again and just on GP because they're not about to get my okra.
I do understand, and maybe I need to do that. But the issue is that the community garden doesn't have a hose. There's no water hookup, so it's all rain barrels.
If you don't get a spray bottle with one of those straight sprays and just you might have a little carpal tunnel after, but
there you go. Oh my God. Well, Ken, this episode is with a guest. We have a guest with us today. So excited. We need to have a little sound effect moment. Like, I feel like we need a little situation. Right. We have Liam Colley coming on to the podcast today. Liam Colley is a licensed midwife who has dedicated their career to improving the lives of LGBTQ plus families having babies. Over 3 decades, Liam's work has impacted thousands of queer and trans parents, both in private practice as a healthcare provider and as a strong advocate for gender inclusivity within childbirth professions. Liam attended over 600 births before retiring from catching babies, and he still provides adjunct care through his LGBTQ plus pregnancy and parenting program and solo conception support groups. Liam has been instrumental in establishing the practice of in-home IUI among community-based midwives across the U.S. He created the first advanced practice IUI provider course for midwives in 2016, which evolved into the Queer Conception Provider course in 2024, expanding to include primary care providers as well as community-based practitioners. Liam is a parent of 4 grown children and shares their empty nest in Seattle, Washington with 2 cats. Liam is the author of Queer Conception, the Complete Fertility Guide for Queer and Trans Parents to Be. Liam, thank you so much for being on Kinfolk Unscripted. We're so excited to have you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, so the first question that we ask all of our guests is, who are your kin?
My kin. I have a little bit of a varied answer. When I think of the word kin, I think, I was raised by kind of right-wing Republicans from Kansas City, Missouri area. Some rural small town, like my grandparents farmed or lived in a small town. And I'm relatively estranged from family of origin, but I still consider them my kin, just like in that meaning of the world. Like, these are the people I came from. These are the people who made me. And after that, I raised myself. And then I do have one queer cousin who I used to be super tight with. We're the same age. So, like, in that, like, felt sense of these are my people of my bio family, I feel like I'm really lucky to have her. And then there's also, like, the family that I created with children, which includes my daughter's dad, who I was only with for a couple years. He's happily partnered with somebody, and actually they just moved just outside of Chicago. And then I had a blended family. I brought 1 child to the relationship. My ex brought 3. Those kids are my kids, even though they're spread across the country, age 25 to 35, and one hasn't spoken to me in a decade. Still my kin. Somebody's your kiddo, they're always your kiddo, no matter what happens. And then I have my kind of chosen family, which is a word that queer communities use a lot. And I get it, right? Like, I have longed for actual chosen family, like chosen family that's going to show up when you're sick, that's going to, or when you need them, people that are going to invite you to holiday celebrations instead of, like, a lot of people that you think of as chosen family, like, they're off with their family of origin when it's a holiday. And I'm like, well, I'm sitting here at home, so clearly we're not family, right? But I do have 3 close friends who I've known for more than 25 years. I mean, close to 30 now. And those people who have been in my life long term, who I actually have spent some holidays with, I guess that's a little bit of a signifier for me, because that's when everybody else goes to their family of origin and when I really need family. And those folks are my kin too, we're each other's emergency contact and closest people. And those are the people who are actually intricately woven into my life. So, and then there's like queer community, which I do like, yeah, we are family. I know it's a little bit like overused phrase, but there is a way that when, as a queer trans person, when I'm around other queer and gender terrific folks, I feel like I'm with my people. I am with my
Mhm.
There are experiences that we have that don't even have to be explained. We just know. And that like sense of belonging that I think is supposed to happen with your kin. Um, I feel it deepest when I'm with other queer folks. And I feel like my role as a midwife in that community is like this sort of that's an expression of kinship in terms of like caring for my community.
Mhm.
You know, if this small town that is queerness were actually a little village, like I'd be the one caring for all the families. It's just there's a bit of a diaspora and I do a lot of it over Zoom.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much power and peace in walking into a room and not having to explain yourself. So I definitely do understand, what you mean by that. And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and so what brought you to birth and fertility work and ultimately writing Queer Conception?
Mm. I was unintentionally pregnant when I graduated from college and uh, decided to stay pregnant and have a
Mhm.
baby. And when I went into like I just graduated college, so and this is like way back in the day, this is 1994, so we didn't stay on our parents' health insurance after like graduating from college. There was no
Oh,
like
okay.
coverage to age 25. So I went into the local social services office and the social worker gave me some names of OBs and I was like, do any of these do anything like any of these providers do anything kind of like more naturally? And because that was kind of my vibe at the time. And she was like, well, no, but there's a birth center in town with midwives. And I don't even really know how I knew that midwives existed. Maybe women's studies classes or
Mhm.
something, but that's where I landed. And I had such an empowering, like deeply transformative experience through not only becoming a parent, but through the model of care that I was receiving. I think that as a 21-year-old with an unplanned pregnancy, that came from a very short term at that point relationship, I think there was a lot of room for me to be kind of like diminished in the care environment. Um, I mean, nowhere near the level as if I weren't white, but still just being a young person, like that age discrimination is still
Mhm.
so rampant in healthcare contexts. And my midwife like saw me as a whole person and like gave me the agency to make the decisions that were right for me and left me alone while I was birthing, other than making sure everybody was safe. And,
Mhm.
really like she was the one who said we were never meant to do this alone. And that has just rung true. It rang true for me as a new parent. I did a lot of like getting people together for play groups, which are really about the parents getting together, and then started facilitating groups and realizing that I was called to midwifery and living in a state where midwifery was illegal at the time. And finally coming out and moving to the West Coast. I knew one person who lived on the West Coast, and she lived in Seattle, where I had been looking at midwifery schools, and I was like, well, it looks like that Seattle school is the best one around at this point in time. So I ended up going there, and by the time I graduated, I was like, okay, this is a community-based model of care, and my community is queer folks, so I want to specialize. And there was one practice in the whole country that specialized in caring for queer families, and that was Maya Midwifery. So I moved to the Bay and took over that practice about a year after I graduated. And after a couple decades of caring for queer and trans folks building their families through donor insemination, I thought, how about I just go ahead and write this book, because it's got to come out of me. I'm saying the same things over and over and over again to individual people. I need to do something more broadly helpful to my greater community, which is this kind of this similar to the decision I made to stop attending births. I was like, I'm this like one-on-one care is so amazing and so special, rarely covered by insurance, at least for the, you know, the number of hours that we spend, very, very underpaid. And I was spending all of my time with individual families, and decided in about 2018 to stop attending births and instead do pregnancy care in a group format, specifically for queer and trans families. So kind of all the like care that I provide during pregnancy and postpartum is all non-clinical, like group facilitation. I mean, I do a lot of teaching. So like the families get a 30-year experienced midwife, you know, to like teach them basic childbirth prep, but also I'm holding so much of the queer and trans experience. And I think the book has been great for more and more people finding me and finding that care, but my practice hasn't changed a ton since the book came out. It's been going for quite some time, so there's tons of word of mouth over the years, and mostly I just like, you know, for whatever topic, I'm like, okay, so just grab my book and look on page 75. You'll find a lot more about this. Now let's talk about something else. You know, it's kind of like, don't have to do so much regurgitating information.
Yeah.
I feel like what is such a blessing that you were like, hey, I'm going to do this book, because me as a queer on the South Side of Chicago, I would have almost never come in contact with your work. Mostly because a lot of when I'm thinking about building my family, I'm thinking about super Chicago and super local base. When I'm thinking about midwives and clinics and things like that. And so I just feel so grateful. And I feel like it was such a blessing for you to be like, I'm going to actually synthesize all of these years of education, all of these years of experience into this manual, because there's quite literally still, I think there's like one other book that's kind of similar, but nothing that is as like comprehensive as Queer Conception. So what a blessing for you to like really just be like, actually this information needs to live outside of who I can immediately communicate it to.
Totally.
But you and I had a quick conversation before hopping on to actually record. And I want to kind of go back to something you said when we met about how queer family making stands in direct contrast. And this is my language. You didn't use all of this language, but it was what I got from what you were saying, is like it stands in direct contrast to the dominant white patriarchal capitalist narrative of how we conceive of family. And I would love for us to kind of ground this conversation in that. And I'm just curious if you can like expound on what you mean by how queerness does that and queer family making does that.
Well, our kind of like mainstream idea of what family is comes from colonization, specifically colonization from like mostly like Christian religious based societies going into other societies where there are multiple genders are acknowledged and multiple different ways that humans choose to live together. So this idea of like the, you know, nuclear family is very new and very unique to the descendants and continued colonists around the world. I think that I know that that's a new concept for a lot of people, but when you scroll back through history and you realize how gender variance and sexual variance shows up in different ways around the world and even across species. And then you look at the historical paradigm of, a first world putting itself out as the ideal and coming into other communities and expecting them or forcing them to change and assimilate. That includes things like gender expression, sexual orientation. And in a big way, there's a huge historical intersection between racism and transphobia historically because of that intersection. So as people have of all backgrounds have tried to survive, and often by assimilation into that dominant paradigm, family groupings that are self-created, that are made up of aunties and uncles and chosen family, all of those sort of ways of doing family beyond that male female married couple model, I think there's a lot of commonality. And for me, as a white queer person, the way that queers do that is refreshing because it's not something that is really like there's just so much like pressure to be independent and self-sufficient. And to be honest, like one of the first anti-racism workshops that I did, that's what I walked away with. Like they had us having conversations. I don't even remember what it was, but I noticed that every time I was in a small group with folks of color, the answers were about resourcing among community and chosen family. And my answers to problems were all based on my privilege and aloneness in a lot of ways. And I think that maybe that's part of, I don't know, this is theoretical, but maybe that's why so many white queer communities really struggle to actually manifest what I would consider chosen family. Like I was sharing in my intro, like, don't be a stranger. Everybody's welcome. You're alone, come over. Don't be alone. There's a seat at our table kind of thing. I just think is more, in my experience, more common in communities of color, and to a certain extent Jewish communities, depending on the Jews.
Yeah.
But like there's a lot of that in Jewish ritual, is like there's always a seat at the table. Don't let anybody be alone on Passover, kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think there's something really interesting about that intersection of like race and like cultural identity and queerness, because it's like in so many ways there is this like pull towards the chosen family, and not just chosen but also like revolutionizing family within queer communities, right? But then the ways that whiteness can even hinder white queers from really actualizing and experiencing that full, because there's not really a model. There isn't really a model. It might be, I think there's a lot of longing and desire, but there's not a lot of model and instruction about what that looks like. And there is something that is inherent. I know specifically I can really only speak to Blackness. A lot of us, a lot of Black folks have a sense of family that is outside of bloodlines. Like we've got cousins that ain't my mama's sisters, Keith. There is this way of expanding the kinship or expanding the family structure to include more people than what is just literally in the lineage or in the family tree. And I know I have experienced Black queer folks really engaging in community in a way that like is even more kind of revolutionary than even just straight Black folks.
Yet another way that the centering whiteness in queer communities is a disservice. Like we have a lot to learn.
There's always a lot to learn. There's always a lot to learn. I think too, it's like there's sometimes it can be like a resistance to learn as well. But
oh hell yeah,
that's a whole nother podcast for it.
Yeah. So, what are the main pathways to conception for queer people, and how do you help folks figure out which one might be the best for them?
Hmm. Well, sometimes queer people do have a partner of the opposite assigned sex. So sometimes it does work out. Or maybe you're bi, or maybe your partner's trans, or any kind of configuration where it's two people of opposite assigned sex.
Mhm.
Um, there is donor insemination, which can be done just by self insemination with a sample from somebody you know, to using frozen sperm and doing intrauterine insemination, accessing sperm from a sperm bank. And then there's the option of in vitro fertilization, which sometimes people use if they're younger and they decide to freeze eggs, or if they're going through a gender transition and freeze eggs, or if they are planning multiple children and want to limit their cost. Sometimes if you're having multiple kids and or planning pregnancies in your late 30s, early 40s, people will do IVF so that they are retrieving eggs that are younger and then making embryos and then freezing the embryos so that when they want to have baby number 2 or 3, they've got embryos that were made with younger eggs. And it's a very
Mhm.
simple, like, frozen embryo transfer procedure. It's also possible if more than one person in the relationship has a body that can produce eggs and is willing to produce eggs for the pregnancy, then sometimes people will use eggs from one partner to create embryos that the other partner carries. Or maybe they're each going to carry one.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of options, even within those options that I described. And even within those primary options, something like IVF can only happen in a fertility clinic. Like, you're taking human gametes and combining them in a lab. So that's very much high tech and requires a lot of medication and monitoring. For just donor insemination, even if you're getting sperm from a sperm bank, your likelihood of success is higher with intrauterine insemination, which across the US is typically done. That procedure and those families are referred to fertility clinics. However, the vast majority of recipients of donor sperm are not infertile. Like, infertility happens at the same rate for us as it does for hetero people. We
Mhm.
should be screened before spending thousands of dollars on donor sperm. And most of us are only there because of what's termed social infertility, because of lack of a sperm producing partner, not clinical infertility. So, what that means is, for somebody who doesn't have any evidence of infertility, IUI could be provided in the office of your family doctor, or in a midwife office, or at home. There are midwives who do in home IUI. I am one of them. And that's typically with frozen sperm samples. And the reason people are wanting IUI is because when you freeze sperm, it doesn't live as long, and those frozen vials are only a fraction of one ejaculate.
Mhm.
And so putting those sperm cells a little closer to the egg right inside the uterus tends to increase success rates. The other thing that I was going to comment on is that while you absolutely can get a fresh sperm sample from somebody you know and self inseminate with that without ever going to a clinic, if that person is not your sexual partner, then you're introducing a new exposure to body fluids and the risk for sexually transmitted infections. And because the law only supports, um, how should I phrase this? According to the law, if there's not a healthcare provider present, then you could have had sex with that guy and he's therefore the father of your child, if he
Mhm.
ever wants to be, or if you ever want to sue him for child support. So there are real legal and health repercussions to using fresh sperm from a known donor. And there are ways to go through screening, and some people will freeze known donor samples so that you can make sure that they're free of transmissible agents. And there are absolutely ways that you can work with a donor and still get health care, but folks who use a known donor um, struggle to find healthcare because many clinics either don't accept families that are using a known donor or require that you pay to have the samples frozen. Even if your donor is asexual and never had sex with anybody in his life, they will make you do all the like HIV, like all of the screenings. So um, it makes sense that that stuff is universal, but there are individual cases where the risk is exceedingly low. And
Mm-hmm.
from my perspective, an individual should be able to choose how they inseminate, how they create their family. And especially in queer communities, you know, the paradigm is that we've been making babies with fresh samples from our friends for a long time, but you we're all sent to fertility care. That's the only place that you can get any kind of counseling on reproductive health. Like you could go to Planned Parenthood and hopefully get somebody like, you know, what I want to say, flexible enough to be able to roll with that and apply what they know to like help you avoid risk. But that's not like the only way you're going to find care that is really individualized and supporting you in very thorough, informed decision making, including ordering semen analysis, STI screening, and even helping you get connected with a place to freeze sperm if you want. That's only going to happen outside the system. I do that every day, and there are other midwives who provide counseling for folks who are inseminating with a known donor, but most physicians don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because of the
Mm-hmm.
perceived risk. And so,
Yeah.
what that means is that a way that we've culturally built our families is not accessible in the current healthcare system. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that is currently not the hill that I am gonna die on because there's other steps before we get there, but that reality still exists and is very real
Mm-hmm.
among many of the families that I serve, just in terms of how do I marry this idea between it's best for kids to know their donor and our desire to know the person that our child is coming from and accessing medical care around that, even if it's just counseling around STI risk transmission. I gave you a way longer answer than you asked
No,
for.
like, but I very thorough, and I think it's going to be very helpful for people who are interested in trying to understand the landscape of healthcare alone is complicated on purpose. So you add being queer on top of that, and it's going to complicate it even more.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's super helpful. And it sounds like, the way that you go about trying to figure out the best route is looking at the family's goals, the body parts that are there to work with,
Mm-hmm.
and the finances, because it is very expensive to go down these routes. So yeah.
And I will add that for families of color who are trying to get pregnant with donor gametes, especially donor sperm, like there's very few non-white donors in banks.
Mm,
So if you are multi-ethnic, mixed race, families run up against like, well, one partner would really rather not carry the pregnancy, but if we don't use the other partner, then we don't have access to having a child that looks like a blend of their parents.
mm-hmm.
Um, and some clinics now, as the industry becomes more and more corporatized, all these corporations are buying up the clinics. And it seems like there's some kind of partnership happening with the banks where I'm wondering if they've been maybe bought or are going to be bought by the same
Oh
corporation.
man. Wow.
There are clinics that require you to use a specific sperm bank. So,
Mm.
like here in Seattle, if you have to use Seattle Sperm Bank, you're lucky if there's 5 Black donors. And if you have an Rh negative blood type or some other like heritable condition, then that might like cut 4 of those donors out. Where
Yeah.
if you weren't limited to that sperm bank, you could choose from anywhere in the country. And that also brings us back to known donors because there's a lot of reasons that there aren't a lot of donors of color in banks, mostly having to do with colonization and the repercussions of all that. And so sometimes people are choosing a known donor because that's the only way that they can find a donor who actually matches their heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is wild.
Mhm.
In the day of our Lord, 2026. It is kind of wild that is still the reality. I think that there's this way that, and it's part of the reason why this is hugely the reason why this podcast exists, right? Is because my spouse and I, Mars and I, we started embarking on our journey to become parents. And the amount of things that we did not know. And I want to say we've been gay our own life, but like the amount of things we did not know going into, we literally were like, oh, we're going to ask a friend. They're going to be like, yes. And we're going to go get pregnant. Like, it was very this kind of simplistic thought. And as we got into the process, it was like, oh my God, there's all these new doors to open. There's all these different options and all these different things to think about. And that's not to even talk about the cost associated to each of those things.
Yes.
And along the way, one thing that was coming up for me, Liam, when you were talking about it, was there's like all of these, like, for example, if you go the known donor route, one, like you said, there's a lot of clinics that are like, we're not touching it. And there's obviously the legal things, but there's all these other pieces that you have to think about. And there's a couple questions floating around in my head for you. And one is like, what are some of the reasons, you touched on this a little bit, but what would be some of the reasons that you have found in your practice why people choose to go with a known donor route versus the sperm bank route? You've spoken a couple of times on those, like race, ethnicity, and things like that. But I'm curious to know, like, what are some of the other reasons why people are like, hey, I don't want to go with the bank. I'm going to go known. I have my own reasons, but I'm curious from as a practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, I think aside from the issues that we've already talked about, cost is a big one. When I started this work in 2000, I guess I really started my 2004, I would say. Donor sperm cost $300 a vial. And now you're lucky to find something for $1,500. And that's for one try. So
$300 is wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, it was in 2004, but still.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, my what was my rent at that time?
I was literally just about to say we could have been paying $600 for a house, $300 for donor sperm, girl.
Totally. Yeah. So cost is a big one. Some people believe that fresh sperm is like always going to be more effective, and that's only in certain circumstances.
Okay.
There's decent success rates from frozen donor sperm. It's just the timing is more specific. And just because a sample is fresh doesn't mean the guy is fertile or the person is fertile.
Right.
I think the first thing to do if you're considering using sperm from somebody you know is ask them to get a semen analysis before you put a lot of, funding and time and emotional energy into all the conversations that typically go into it. Good idea to make sure that he's fertile, that they are fertile. There is the other thing that I want to bring up, which I think is probably, this is the reason that it's really up there with all those other factors, especially over the last few years. The considerations for the offspring, for the donor conceived child or donor conceived adult individual, which is that up until about, I'm going to say 15, 20 years ago, like up until about the turn of the century, families who use donor sperm were typically told not to tell their kids that they were donor conceived. So this is primarily heterosexual families, because did you know it took till 2006 for the American Society for Reproductive Medicine to even issue a statement saying, guess what? Gay and lesbian people desire becoming parents and we shouldn't discriminate against them. It took them until 2013 to add transgender people.
Oh my God.
So when we're talking about historical donor insemination practices, it was, often the doctor's sperm, or a medical student or something way back in the day. And then sperm
Whoa.
banks started in like the 80s. And that's when you could start to get like in some way screened donor sperm. And anyway, so parents were told not to tell their kids that they were donor conceived, but eventually the kids found out, usually right about puberty, when everything pisses you off anyway.
And all the dots start connecting.
Yeah, like either around puberty or a parent's divorce or a parent's death, like these family stories would come out. And then as direct-to-consumer DNA testing started happening, the 23andMe stuff, people started finding out that way that they were donor conceived. And then with social media making people so easy to find, that like the sperm donor industry or the gamete donation industry as a whole does not even use the word anonymous anymore because they can't guarantee anonymity. So we also noticed over time that kids who were donor conceived, who always knew that they were donor conceived from a very young age, for whom donor conception is normalized and a part of their experience in their community because they're around other donor conceived families, those kids do quite well and don't have nearly the negative experience that individuals have when that information is not disclosed and instead comes as a big surprise. It really causes people to go into a crisis of identity. And it's unfair that happened to those people. And that being said, there is a vocal minority who is really kind of trying to work against donor conception, or at least the donor sperm industry, because they're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where what we know is that when kids are told early and often, when you respect their own experience of their own identity formation, which means they may call the donor a dad. You got to just shut up about that and let them call the donor a dad if that's what's meaningful to them, right? It might really hit hard as, to female parents, or especially as a non-gestational parent, to hear that kind of thing. But these are like teenage kids that are now using this verbiage, right? So if you've always talked about this over time, there's also so much more room for the parents to not only give the child the language that they use, but also just to like make it not a taboo subject. So that when your kid is going through adolescence and they're kind of trying to like reckon with broader culture versus my own experience in my own family, and what does this mean to me internally in my own identity in a way that I can communicate with other people, they're going to come up with their own language, they're going to have their own feelings, they're going to have their own experiences around it. And as long as you honor that your child is an individual separate from you and honor that process, research shows that that's very, very protective. I think that some of the suppositions that I'm making about being raised in queer community just seem obvious to me, like that it's not stigmatized. Maybe that shows up in the literature somewhere. But I think it's the stigma that was really in the way of hetero folks not disclosing universally. But that's really starting to change. And the ASRM now, doesn't require but recommends that people have a visit with a mental health professional who can talk to them about like, these are the things to consider about raising a donor conceived child, things that maybe you just wouldn't have thought of that could actually be really helpful. The problem with that is that psychological visit is that a lot of clinics require it, where the guidelines just say that it's highly recommended. And so then that makes queer folks feel like they're being required to jump through extra hoops in order to get care.
Yeah.
Also, we have a history of experiencing abuse among the psychiatric care community. And so it feels like we're being like, or like being told that we shouldn't parent because something's wrong with us, just queerness being criminalized or made out to be an illness. So there's all that like historical repercussions of that.
So that piece about the psych visit
Yeah.
has confounded me and mildly pissed me off.
Mildly.
I mean, it doesn't
we
help
talk
that
about-
we used to call it a psych eval, which
And
I'm
they should really
imagining.
explain what it's for. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't
it's
mean to
not
cut
an
you off.
evaluation. It should just be psychoeducation. Like,
Yeah.
yes, just like plain education, but the psycho part of it is like, does anybody struggle with anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder? Are there like psychosocial factors that in your unique situation might come up at some point in this kind of like chosen family building experience? Just being really thorough about all the different dynamics. And it's actually pre-pregnancy care should not just be medical. Like, you're caring for people who are about to become parents. So there's a lot of counseling that could happen. So there's a way to look at it as, oh, this is just really, really good, thorough care for a whole person and a whole family or constellation of family. But when it's required for you and not for heteros, yeah, they chose their partner too. Why can't I choose my best friend to be my sperm donor or my partner's brother? I just remembered the other thing that I was going to say, which is, oh yeah, not only is the psych visit often required in clinics rather than being optional, the psych providers that are hired by clinics often don't know anything about queer family building. I've heard that story come back to me over and over and over again. And I really hope it's improving. There was just an article that I helped work on. I submitted my piece in 2003 and it was finally released this week. The LGBTQ special interest group of the ASRM just published guidelines for fertility care and family building. And there are some like additional things that don't appear in their like donor insemination guidelines for counseling that are specific to queer folks and are in that article. So we basically had a queer president of, I don't know if she identifies as queer, at least she's lesbian, of the ASRM. And that's how all this stuff got through just over the past like 5 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would love to link that below for folks too, if it's possible, if it's available for everyone to read.
It's it's a journal, so they want you to pay, but
okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We should link it. There's also a recent article that came out of like guidelines for gender inclusivity in clinics that was written by other folks in the SIG. But yeah, I was honored to be asked. It was probably because of my book. They said, will you write the part on folks who have eggs and are seeking pregnancy? And I never thought it would come out. And then it just, boom, was there. Pride 2026.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. I think that the piece about the fact that I love a good, thorough preconception moment. Like, I think that's really beautiful. I think it's really critical in a lot of ways. And also, you're the first person that I have heard articulate the therapy sessions in the way that you just articulated them. Because the multiple clinics that I have been to, that we have been to, they're just like, hey, you got to get a psych eval. And it's like, you know how many straight people really desperately should have gotten a fucking psych eval before having a kid. And then we have to, and we got to pay for it. We got to come out of pocket for it.
And then it turns out this person might not even actually be, good enough to be
like
having
actual
a conversation
trained
with you. Yeah.
Right.
Just some Random therapist.
Mhm. It's like they're
That's
hired by clinics, so
phenomenal.
they typically specialize in infertility, and they're, mostly counseling hetero people who have been through or are going through a whole infertility process. Well, we have needs too, which
Yeah.
are outlined in this new publication. Like, one of the things on the list is, I forget how they phrased it, but like, okay, you're a queer person having a kiddo, you're going to be coming out over and over and over and over again. Like,
Mm.
closet when you have a kid. So like that kind of consideration that maybe folks just haven't, like, you've got the experience of somebody who's helped many families through this. And I'm not going to say that, like, just because we don't have infertility doesn't mean we walk into those clinics not experiencing a great deal of distress. Like, at least hetero people, they're going there because they're infertile, so they've, already are maybe feeling defeated. But we walk in the door, we don't see reflections of ourselves on the walls, on the forms. The providers don't know what to do with us. They don't know who they're talking to on the phone. If you have a deep voice, they think you've got sperm and you need to talk to the sperm department, and you're like, nope, I'm trans and I'm getting pregnant, please send me to the doctor.
Yeah.
Just a whole variety of things. So, and just, being a queer trans person in the world and everything it takes to navigate assisted conception, a really good therapist will be able to hold both of those. Just like in my queer focused practice, I also have hetero families who sometimes come to me for care because they're having trouble at home and they're not ready to go to a clinic, but they want to do IUI. I'm going to hold space for them. I'm going to say mom and dad and, just get into their worldview and exist there and care for them. I've cared for lots of hetero people. It's not my specialty, but if somebody's in my office, I need to be prepared to serve them. And if
Yeah.
I'm not prepared, then I'm not the right provider for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that changes. I really hope that clinics start making sure that their providers do have more multicultural experience and education, because we're just talking about, like, standard cis het folks, TM, versus queer families. Like, what if you're an immigrant? What if you're a cancer survivor? Like, there's just so many different things that can be going on in the background for somebody going through that transition of becoming a parent and navigating what that all means for being in this system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. This is a question for me. This is a question for me. I hope it helps somebody else. But can we talk about grief?
Yeah.
So as my spouse and I began to enter this journey, I had the hubris to be like, this is gonna be fine. We'll take our time. If it takes longer than it needs to, that'll be fine. And I should really stop calling my own bluff on things, because all of the setbacks, all of the unknowns, all of the stop and goes, the waits, all of that has landed in my heart in a space of a lot of grief. And it was something that I just truly was not expecting or prepared for. And I imagine in your work of holding space for folks to conceive, you have, I imagine, been in that, also being a parent yourself, been in that place of like holding the grief of longing and desire to build your family. So I'm curious to know, how do you engage with your clients around that? Like, what are the support systems you might offer for that?
Well, there's a number of different things that are going through my mind, not knowing the specifics of your situation,
Yeah.
but just what you described. Um, what I'm hearing is that grief came up as you were trying to navigate the care you needed to get pregnant, and that you lost, like, your locus of control left and you were at the whim of scheduling, or maybe the whim of your body, or
Financing. Yeah.
finances. um I think that like, I think one way that I deal with it is by providing the care that I provide, so that people have some of the decision making already taken into account before being in a clinic environment. Like, for instance, um, if you had caught, just, is it okay if I use you as an example?
Yes, please. Please.
Like, if
Yeah.
you had called me up at the beginning of the process, we would have talked about, okay, how many kids do y'all want to have? Who wants to carry? What are you thinking around donor type? Sounds like you have a known donor.
No, so we had someone that we were really excited about. They were not interested in
Yeah.
engaging with us, so it kind of spun us into this like unknown of like, what do we do now? And we're kind of, a lot of financial things have happened in between that has kind of pushed timelines back. But we're still in that place where we're like, okay, we know we want a known donor. We do not want to go through a bank. So we're thinking about doing going through Seed Scout. Have you heard of Seed Scout?
Yeah. Mhm.
So we're thinking about going through Seed Scout, and now the thing is like, that is a very large penny.
Yeah.
Like upfront cost.
Yeah. And there's
And
another
so,
business I found out about that does a similar thing, and it's even more expensive.
oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at with
Yeah.
it. Is like, we know we want a known donor. We have, we also, in between that, we like reached out to our closest friends, was like, hey, do you know people? Like kind of did this community search.
Mhm.
Was not successful. We had a lot of friends who were like, we had some friends who were like, oh, we have this idea for this person, no one
Mhm.
being interested, which sometimes I'm like, is there like a black stigma thing happening? Like, I'm curious if there's some kind of cultural thing that's not only one of the reasons why we don't donate to banks, to sperm banks, but also why this is not in our cultural like
Mhm.
mind almost. But anyway, that's a whole aside. But yeah, so we went through that process, and then that was a dead end. And now we're like, well, we'll have to go through Seed Scout, which means that we'll have to cough up this money for it.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think, if you all had said that your ideal was a known donor, then I would have, counseled you on things like, I'd probably say, go look at that chapter of my book. There's a whole guide for doing the asking. And I
And
might
did.
remind you of those. And then I'd say, if you do have somebody who expresses interest in talking more about it, first thing to do is ask them to get a semen analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing that really, I mean, it sounds like you've experienced this on maybe a smaller scale, but like, people set up a whole thing with a donor and get all the way up to being about ready to inseminate, and then he pulls out. Sorry, no pun intended. um, so that's a really common moment of grief, is like, somebody thinks they have a known donor and then it falls through for whatever reason, or just fielding the no's.
Yeah.
And when you don't have a no, or when you don't have a yes, and you've like kind of gone through all the different routes, then you are left with somebody that you didn't know previously. Their Seed Scout, just for people who are listening, is a business that's owned by a lesbian couple, and they recruit and screen donors. So the donors are screened. So it's not like, there's another database online called like the Just a Baby or something like that, where people post availability as donors. And what I've been told is that you really have to have a strong stomach for all the guys on there saying that they want to conceive naturally, and really just there for sex, not for being a sperm donor. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
gross.
Oh my God.
But there are people on there who aren't coming from that perspective, and I've had clients choose to conceive with donors from that website. But what I always warn people is that you don't really know this person. You don't have a relationship. You don't know how they respond during conflict. You don't know if you can trust them. Sometimes they'll give you a STI screen that's from like 8 months ago and be like, here's my STI screen. And if recipients don't know it, like they'll say, oh yeah, he's been screened. And they send me the lab report and it's like 8 months old. Well, what have you been doing since 8 months ago?
Right.
No, so like just I think that there's a lot of room for people to get really taken advantage of with those donor listservs. And it really leaves families not only vulnerable to disease transmission, but also the legal risks that were described earlier about he could sue for custody. Or one of his relatives, like his mother, could sue, like, or for visitation. You know, there's all kinds of things that can happen. Like,
Wow.
So something like Seed Scout, they're doing all the FDA screening. I don't know if they're doing site counseling for their donors. Even at banks, it's not required for donors to receive any site counseling.
Yeah. How it works is essentially you kind of like fill out a questionnaire, you talk to a counselor kind of, and you're like, hey, this is what we're looking for, this is what we want. They go do their search, they pull some people from you for you, and then there's a few rounds of like looking at their information and then looking at deeper information, and then you actually have some conversations with folks. And then after that process, then you do the fertility screen. So then you do the sperm analysis, then you do, and they like so they like coordinate this for you. They do the sperm analysis, then you do the legal, then you do, if your clinic requires you to do the psych eval, then you do that. Like you do all of it. They kind of help coordinate all of this up until your sperm is shipped. But all of that is happening post choosing who you want to move forward.
Some of that, I don't know if it's just kind of third, hand, but I can't imagine why they would not make sure that any donor they're offering you is at least has passed a basic semen analysis.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do that first, but I know that because we had a consultation with them and they walked us through the entire process and like the timeline of it. And that was like their first, they're like, after you choose, then we go to the analysis and you do like genetic testing and stuff like that.
Yeah. So what I just met them at a conference and they said that they were
nice.
screening their
Okay.
donors. And so I was imagining that they
okay.
were like producing donors that were good to go and had that screening done. So sounds to me like it's a lot more kind of fly by the seat of the pants, sort of get it all as it goes. And if you did all that work and spent that time and then they finally did the semen analysis and he was shooting blanks, you'd be back at square one and you lose. So again, it's a newer company. These are just a couple of queer women who had babies and decided to do this thing. They're not healthcare providers. They can read the guidelines as much as anybody else, but they don't have experience with family after family after family going through all of the moments of disappointment that can add up to real grief. A process that is extended and that has things continually falling through. Back to the original question, I would have said, I think where I was going is, I would have had a lot of these conversations about like where you can find people who are known to be a donor, understanding that you don't know them, and that the services might be even more expensive. I think that, I guess a lot of the way that I support people in their grief is by either trying to prevent it with information like that or giving people information that they may have. So many of us have to go online to even find information about queer family building.
Mhm.
And if folks have gone online and read negative stuff about these donor conceived adults who weren't told until they were older and have misgivings about being donor conceived, there's a lot of negative press out there. And so more and more people are like, wow, yeah, it seems irresponsible to use a donor from a bank. There was this one New York Times article right before 2020, maybe in 2018 or 19. It was in the New York Times. It was a photo essay. And the photographer was queer spawn. He had two moms. But he
Mhm.
went around, he found all of his donor siblings. There were like 30 something of
Wow.
them. And he took photos of them. But in every single photo, no one was smiling. It was as if he told them not to smile. They all had the same blank expression. I think they were trying to exhibit the similar facial features, but everything in the article, in the body of the article, was from a hetero perspective. There was no queer lens whatsoever. And this is a time when, like, gay marriage was relatively new. Like, we just got, so many rights were just recently hard earned and continuing to be threatened as they continue to be today. Why
Right.
is anybody throwing queer parents under the bus? So sometimes I am correcting that misinformation, that the people who are most upset generally come from hetero couples where it was stigmatized and they weren't talked to about it, and sending people to the research page on the Sperm Bank of California website, which has study after study after study of donor conceived people, donor conceived families, showing all the best practices and that our kids are doing fantastic.
Mhm.
And I never want I probably also acknowledging how many barriers there are for us to build our families. Um, if you have room in your heart and in your life and you want to become a parent, lack of sperm from somebody you know shouldn't keep you from manifesting that dream, because there
Mhm.
is a way to do it well. And um donor sperm is how we've always built our families. The vast majority of same-sex female assigned couples use not anonymous but unidentified donor sperm to get pregnant. And so I think, like, it doesn't mean that those same feelings that brought you to wanting a known donor aren't still there, but it might lighten the impact of any misinformation or ways that you may have internalized um, the experience of all of these barriers, make and in such a way that it's making you feel like you're never going to be able to be a parent, or
Mhm.
any of the ways that we still carry internalized homophobia, transphobia, just all those negative messages. When you're a member of a marginalized community, it's a full-time job to keep those tapes from playing in the background, especially when we're down. So I do a lot of building people up. I do a lot of, naming what's happening, and building people up again and helping people kind of like reconstruct a reality where they can move forward. Um, there's also like some of the things that people come in with after they've already kind of been through the system a little bit. Uh,
Mhm.
like, people might be trying to arrange a known donor on their own and even pay exorbitant amounts of money for like a mail-in freezing one sample. And then they finally get to me and I'm like, these samples are low count, or they're like in this system where we don't even know what state your samples are in. So just like helping people avoid the pitfalls that can happen without guidance. But I
Yeah.
guess that goes in the prevention column. um, Another place where grief comes up in my practice is people moving forward with family building on their own because they don't have a partner to conceive with, or there was a breakup after, the partner said no or not ready. And then now they're like 38, 39, 42, and, have to process the loss of the dream of having a baby with a partner as part of their move towards parenting. So I just think that like having a lot of validation, a lot of support, and acknowledgement that these things hit our community in a different way, even pregnancy loss, it's measurable that queer folks are impacted exponentially around pregnancy loss compared to heterosexual folks because of everything it takes to get pregnant in the first place. The fact that there's no place for your non-gestational female partner to go for support, right? Well, is she gonna walk into a dad's group? She's gonna walk into a group of people that had the loss happen in their bodies. Like, where do you go? Yeah.
Oof.
So I think for me, because my practice is mostly clinical, the psychosocial stuff just in the counseling just kind of gets woven in. But I also keep a good referral list of, therapists, support groups that people can go to around grief. And there is a book by Krista Craven called, the main title is Reproductive Losses. It's about loss in queer family building, and she includes experiences of loss like you're having now, where like there hasn't even been a pregnancy yet and you're already experiencing grief. It came out a few years ago. It's kind of an academic publication, so it didn't get circulated a lot. But she also has a website that I think it's called LGBTQ reproductive loss. That's what I want to say. We can look it up and put it in the show notes.
Definitely will.
Yeah, might be some helpful stuff there. She's got quotes from people, so it just feels like you go there and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not alone.
Yeah. I really appreciate that answer. I think it's like in our society in general, grief is we don't have a lot of containers for it in general. And one thing I have learned over time is that grief can be so compounding. And I feel like sometimes it's like it hits in this different way when you're like, I didn't even know that was possible. Like I didn't know it was possible to feel those feelings. But yeah, I appreciate the answer. I think that like one thing that I have found that has been super helpful is having other trying to conceive queer community. We have been building that, and that has been super helpful because it's very much a situation where it's like just not alone. All of us are in the same boats, like trying to figure it out at different points and stages of the process, but experiencing very similar feelings.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for the mental health community to make sure people are trained, to hold space for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely an open space for that.
Yeah.
So, Liam, I want to ask you one last question here. Well, before I ask the question, I just want to say, especially with that answer that you just gave, I'm sure you know this, but the work you're doing is imperative, and you have transformed so many lives in person and through the book. And I know you can't work forever, but I hope that you do as long as you can to keep helping to make it easier for queer people to conceive, or at the minimum, make the emotional process easier. Being pregnant, being a parent is a very vulnerable space. And so I think, everyone that you've been able to help is very lucky that you know what that space feels like and that you have space for them. So with that being said, with the political and social world feeling like it's in a tailspin, especially for those of us that are in marginalized communities, has anything changed in the landscape of queer conception since your book came out that you would want to revise or add to?
Well, actually, I did just do some corrections. They didn't give me a second edition, but they said I could do some corrections. And the main things that I changed in the book were there's new research around transgender people being able to use their own gametes to conceive. It
Mm.
looks like some trans women are able to be fully on gender affirming hormones and come off of it and still conceive, which we thought that wasn't a possibility, or at least not even really worth trying. It's still no small feat for somebody to discontinue their gender affirming hormone treatment. But for families who choose it, it may be a more worthwhile option than previously believed. And I think there were even some new studies on men conceiving, which were also reassuring that, like, once you stop your gender affirming hormones, you can have like a reasonable expectation of conceiving equal to somebody else your age. But there were more that was known, I think, before. Now there's more like IVF studies where we're really getting into the nitty gritty of uterine function after gender affirming hormone treatment, and kind of what the ovaries are doing, and the kind of like yield we would expect on a stimulation and retrieval cycle. And there was another one related to trans men, which was, oh yeah, um kind of the latest thing with conceiving as a trans masculine person is there are now a few case studies, and even like another study bringing those all together, showing that it's possible for trans men to not have to stop their hormone treatment for a super long time before
Mm.
stimulation and retrieval. You have to be ready to cycle. You kind of your body has to be in a hormonal range where you can make eggs, but that may not take more than one, like it may just be like 1 month off of testosterone, and then they're going to treat you like a cis woman with elevated testosterone, which is what we now call PMOS.
Mm.
People with polycystic ovarian syndrome, or what we're now polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, um, it's a state of high testosterone. So there's already protocols for people born with a uterus and ovaries who have high testosterone.
Mhm.
So that has limited the time that people have to stay on hormones. Of course, a lot of trans care is experimental because all we have to go on are case reports or
Mhm.
like theoretical knowledge. Um, but it's working, and people are like not having it be such a long time, like maybe 1 to 3 months total off of gender affirming hormones,
Okay.
for a pretty good, likelihood of success, or like having a decent outcome of eggs. It's always going to be impacted by how old you are and any other health factors. So each person's an individual, but things are just looking better and better for people being able to come off of hormones and still use their bodies to make babies.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I changed, the chapter on identifying ovulation and timing inseminations is pure Gen X, y'all. It is like so wordy. It is so long. It goes over everything twice. And um, people have always been a little, many people, like for the whole time that I've practiced all of these years, I've always taught people how to check their own cervix, how to monitor their fertile fluid, because those are all symptoms of high estrogen that will peak as your egg is releasing. And then after the egg releases, those symptoms start waning again. So when we're trying to time inseminations as close to ovulation as possible, LH strips only get you halfway there. They tell you when you're having the LH surge that precedes the release of your egg, but we're guessing how long you're going to ovulate after that LH surge, which for hetero folks having sex to conceive is perfectly fine. But if you are conceiving with frozen sperm and doing IUI, needs to happen within 19 hours of the release of your egg. And
Mm.
not everybody ovulates 24 hours after their surge. While that is most common, there are individuals who tend to release their egg closer to 12 hours or 36 hours after their surge. So, since I published the book, actually, one more thing I want to say. Over the years, I've watched many, many different companies put their tools on the market, and they're all designed for cis hetero folks. None of them are designed with the level of specificity that we need. But there's a new one on the market that actually measures quantitative hormone levels in your urine, rather than the LH strips, which just give you a yes or no answer based on your LH crossing a threshold. And there was another company that would take a picture of that strip and then give you a number associated with how dark the line was. It's not a direct hormone measurement. These new systems actually are measuring hormone electrolytes in your urine, which means you don't have to check your fluid in your cervix and everything anymore. We now have a test that actually tests for your estrogen level as well as your LH level. So when people chart that, still need to track twice a day because we want to get your best 12-hour window. Like, is if you get your LH surge in the morning, the next day, is it going to be better for us to schedule in the morning or the afternoon? And that's the question we're trying to answer. But if you test twice a day with that system, then the data shows you exactly what that interval is from your surge to your peak estrogen. And so it's made charting a lot easier. I still left everything else in the book, but I also said, hey, there's this new thing. The brands are, there's two of them. One's called Inito, INITO, and one's called Mira. The Mira one is just a little more feminine, so I tend to, and maybe a little bit more expensive, so I just like tell everybody to get the Inito, so then it works for everyone. And you have to test twice a day in order for that to be really useful for frozen. I think given the cost of sperm, it really makes sense to ensure that we're inseminating at the right time. And because everything else that I'm doing in my practice is low tech, which PS is evidence-based, none of the stuff that they're doing for us in clinics, the in-depth fertility screening is not necessary for the vast majority of people. Can just confirm ovulatory cycles with a menstrual history, make sure there's no health factors that would impact your ability to conceive. But in a clinic, they make you do the HSG and a whole bunch of hormone tests, including ovarian reserve, which has no bearing on the outcome or the prognosis for people conceiving with donor sperm. Ovarian reserve is how your body's going to respond to fertility medications and a high-tech conception like IVF. The stimulation with Clomid or Letrozole doesn't increase the pregnancy rate significantly at all, but it does increase your risk of twins by more than 400%. And the ultrasounds and trigger shot also don't improve outcomes over just using basic LH strips at home. So we are being overcharged, over evaluated, over treated in clinics, and the way I practice is the way I've always practiced, but we didn't even have data on actual data of conceiving same-sex female couples until 2014. So 10 years into practice, the first actually useful study showed up. And as all the research has come out of all these interventions that happen in clinics, every single one of them isn't needed, doesn't increase your likelihood of a successful pregnancy. But that being said, I don't want to just time things blindly. I like some confirmation that we're timing at the right time. So still pay close attention to that, probably more close attention than a provider in a clinic would. Clinics just say, test for your LH, test once a day. And when you get a positive, come in the next day, which of course, if you'd started surging the night before after your prior day's test, and then you're not even testing until the next day, and then you're going in, then that's like 2 days after your surge when you finally get So yeah.
That is helpful.
Wow.
That's why I had to write a whole ass book, y'all.
Right. Exactly.
And oh my God.
Extra.
And when does I know that there was, you were still trying to figure this out, but do you know yet when the new edited copy is coming out of Queer Conception?
Yeah. August, sometime in August, she said. Okay.
Well, I'm super excited for folks to be able to go and get that new edition and get this new information and to really support your work. But before we let you go, what is one thing that's like giving you hope right now?
I guess what comes to mind is that the planet's not fully on fire yet.
True. It's true.
Yeah.
I'm about to go out to the coast with one of my oldest friends and chosen kin. So we're gonna pack up our backpacks and go be on the beach for 3 days. And so friendship gives me hope, nature, sunshine, the ocean. It's so much bigger than us. Just being by the
Yeah.
ocean puts things in perspective. Kind of like did we talk about was this is it's funny if I brought this up again, because if I did talk with you about it before, Martissa, I promise I haven't talked about this since. But those astronauts, did we talk right around the time the astronauts came back? Okay, that was somebody else. Those astronauts that came back from flying around the moon, they all got on stage and
Yes.
talked about love.
Yes.
That's really what I thought they were all conveying.
Mhm.
That they left the planet and they saw it from outer space, and they were like, oh my God, the only thing that matters is love.
Mhm.
So that kind of vibe, like the fact that other people in the conventional, I mean, I don't know if astronauts are conventional, but like they were on TV saying that stuff. So somebody had to hear it. But that's what I'm going to get going out to the ocean, is just
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, everything's so much bigger than me. I'm just going to love myself, love my friend, love the planet, take some deep breaths,
Yeah.
watch the bioluminescence at night.
Oh, I love.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
That sounds so amazing.
Yeah.
Liam, will you tell everyone, our audience, where they can find you, your work, your book, all the things?
Yes. My practice is MayaMidwifery.com. That's MAIA, and midwifery is MIDWIFERY. That's my web address is MayaMidwifery.com. So that's where my practice is located, and you can get the book at all major booksellers. I'm out of stock on my website because I'm waiting for the new printed copies to come in, and most of all at your local independent bookstore is the best place to buy my book.
Yeah.
It's also available on Kindle. The Kindle will not be updated. But little special insider tip is that I didn't transition until perimenopause. And so while I was writing the book, I was going through transition. And so if you listen to the audio version, you get my voice early in transition. And the original edition of the book had my given name, because I didn't know if I was going to choose a new name or not, or if I did, what it was going to be. So the new version has Liam on the cover. I think that new cover has been up on the like internet for a while, but all the like physical copies had the old name. So I've been signing them Liam for when I do signed copies, but it's kind of fun that the publication, different aspects of publication kind of followed me through what has turned out to be an amazing like second half of life. Like awesome. Now I get to be read as a male the rest of my life. And either way, part of me is a little bit erased, but I'm pretty happy about this beard. So there it goes.
You sound like Mars. Mars has a very similar experience and being like, either way, part of me is erased, and also the beard is given. Like,
Totally.
Oh my God. Thank you, Liam, for being here and for this time. It was really just so special to spend this time with you. And everyone who is listening, thank y'all for being here.
But yes, thank you, Liam, so much. It's been a treat. We truly enjoyed having conversations with you. And yes, Ken, thank you so much. You can find us on Instagram at Kinfolk Unscripted, Substack at Kinfolk Unscripted, and YouTube at Kinfolk Unscripted, everywhere at Kinfolk Unscripted. Follow us anywhere you get podcasts, and please leave comments. Let us know what you enjoyed, and rate us. We want to continue to grow. Bye, Ken.
Bye, Ken.